Welcome everyone to our City Council work session for Wednesday, July 7, 2021. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag, United States of America, which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, let's move on to roll call, please.
Councilman Scaringi,
Present.
Councilwoman Riley,
Present.
Councilwoman Friedman,
Present.
Councilman Burns, Councilman Strawn, Councilman Scanlon,
Present.
and President Rezanetti.
Present.
That's 4 here, 2 absent, Burns and Strawn.
Okay. All right, so before we begin, we just have some required notifications. Please note that the city abides by New York State and the CDC's requirement that unvaccinated individuals continue to wear masks indoors and remain at the 6-foot social distance, which includes in City Hall and at public meetings like this one. If you are vaccinated, you do not have to wear a mask during this public meeting or be socially distanced. However, if you appear ill or present any COVID-19 symptoms, staff may ask you to leave, distance, or wear a mask regardless of your vaccination status. This meeting is being recorded with video and audio. Members of the public can attend in person or observe by calling in the dial number provided in the meeting notice. Okay, I don't see Mr. Gardner here, so we're going to move on to, oh, go ahead, Sharon. So this is regarding RL 131.
Of a patient stretcher. It goes in the back of the mule.
Okay.
Sorry? Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Sharon Sorkin. I am the Acting Director of Personnel and Safety and also the Deputized Corporation Counsel for purposes of legislation. Today we have a resolution before you for consideration in the form of a request for legislation, which is to accept the donation of a stretcher, patient stretcher from SUNY Broome. The location of that stretcher is generally in a 4x4, also kind of known as an ATV. Looks like a gator. It goes in back of the mule for safe and easy access. And we've accepted a donation similar in the past, and we hope on behalf of the Fire Bureau that council will accept this donation.
Thank you. Does the fire department have a gator that would fit that the stretcher would fit on?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
I will speak for Ron Lake. He could not be here this afternoon and asked me to do this for him.
Okay.
Basically, we have go out every year for a term agreement, and this one is for landscaping, and we'd like to award it to Whittam Planning and Design. It will be a 2-year contract for this year and next year. They were the most qualified bidder out of the ones that engineering received on it.
Any questions? Thank you. So moving on to RL 133 and 132, we have Sharon talking about this instead of Mr. Verduti, correct?
Yes, thank you. And this we have knowledge about due to my position as the Acting Director of Personnel and Safety. There is a water meter billing tasks that we are slowly hoping to transition back to Treasury. For those of you who are not aware, water meter billing used to be a separate office here in City Hall. In order to streamline efficiencies that were made apparent during the COVID process, water meter billing, we'd like to try transitioning it back. Right now, generally between the July and about September would be the training period in order to do that. As a result, the wonderful employee who is taking over some of the water meter billing tasks, we would be advocating for a responsibility adjustment of some kind due to those increased responsibilities, as well as the extra training she will need And for the other woman who works in the Treasury Department, she will be taking over some of the other employees' tasks. It is important to note that that department used to be staffed by 4 to 5 individuals. It was down to, I should say, without the treasurer, it was down to 3 in January. 1 retired, and the city was unable at the time to hire a clerk due to the payout. She's been here for some time. Therefore, the water department has been incredibly, I should say the Treasury Department has been incredibly understaffed during that time. We've made it due to COVID, but these are 2 very deserving employees who made no complaints, requested and advocated for no increases, and were true public servants. So in this, in many ways, makes them whole and also increases the efficiency of billing in the Treasury and water department. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to RL 128. Chuck. Chuck, yeah,
Okay, are
I'm
we
sorry.
talking about 133?
I have you down here for RL 128.
I think we got to do 133. I don't think Sharon actually talked about 130.
Go. Go ahead, Chuck. Or no.
133
Yeah.
was earlier this year, as Sharon was talking about, due to the payout, we were going to bring in a temporary person. We were unable to find anybody to fill that temporary position. So what we'd like to do is move that money back out of a temporary position, put it into a full-time position. So hopefully we can find someone to fill that position out there. Now that all that money, the payouts taken care of, we have the funds there to do it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Can you explain why you asked for this to be expedited, please? Oh, why is it expedited?
Because the city needs to hire someone for that position as of yesterday. It was posted as a part-time position, actually, from the day Anne retired until about 2 weeks ago when we were able to get past her retirement date. So the short is it's long overdue, and we're now open to the public, which changes the traffic and the urgency of the staffing at the treasury.
Thanks.
No problem.
Aviva, another comment to that is today one of the ladies, there's 2 ladies back there, one of them is on vacation, so the other person is doing everything by herself. So the sooner we can get this advertised and get someone in here, it's going to help the public too.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to the next one. So 132.
RL 21-128 is an ordinance to amend the 21 fire budget for temporary services to cover for a retiring program assistant. This person retired, I think it was June 29th or 30th, I can't remember exactly. This person is willing to come back for the remainder of the year and work part-time so we get to the next administration. So we're asking to move $10,000 from the uniforms, which we're going to have $10,000 extra in, and move that to the temporary services in the fire department. We're also asking for this to be expedited because we do need this person in the office.
Any questions?
This was not a retirement that we knew was coming, okay? This is something that basically we had 2 weeks' notice.
Thank you. Any questions? Next one, 129.
RL 21-121 is a resolution establishing a standard workday for all titles and authorizes the city clerk to file standard workday reports with the New York State retirement system. New York State's going through a new retirement system, and this is something that we need to do. This is the first step of probably 2 or 3 others that we're going to have to do. So basically, if you look at it, you'll see the work, all the titles, there's not names associated with it, what their standard workday is so that we can supply this to the state.
My packet is out of
They
order.
look for a resolution to be passed on it.
Okay, now, that was RL 121. Is that what you said, Chuck? Right, it's 129. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm not, yeah, all right, thank you. Any, yes.
Yeah, so council generally typically get it before the business meeting, which is probably going to be May. And that's just, I should say before, is this on for next Wednesday? Yes. Okay.
Any other questions? Again?
Thank you. I was wondering how the workdays were determined and why they are different. I was just surprised to see that some are 8 hours and some are 7 hours. All right. Okay. And that, so you're saying that was determined based on the employees reporting back saying this is how many hours we work typically?
But to clarify, Councilman Friedman, it is not self-determined. The hours of work are in different places in the city, some of which are in our code, which can identify a certain amount of hours. Others are things that have changed over the years when we changed people from 35 to 40 hours. So this is really a codification to streamline payroll so that it's all in one place and doesn't actually change any existing hours at the city. It just codifies what those roles have worked in the past so that there's no confusion, especially going into a change to administration.
I see. And these are all considered full-time employees?
Not every position listed is currently staffed. When we had that, so for example, one of the examples on there is risk assistant paralegal. That used to be one in the Office of Corporation Counsel. It's currently not even budgeted. It's not listed as unfunded. But if the city were to ever retitle that or recreate that job, that's going to go under the hours currently in that chart. So the number of, or I should say the titles under that list are more inclusive than the current employees working in the city. It's just all the existing titles.
Okay.
Thank you. So I believe it was last week or last time we met, we had put forward the resolution accepting the COVID round 2 CDBG and the ASG funds, and a question was asked by this group as to what they would be used for, and and we said there will be RLs in the future, and this is therefore the result of that. This is the start. Some first agencies we've identified that we're going to work with for COVID funds. This is after public input from public hearings. So this is including input from the Continuum of Care NY 511, the Homeless Coalition. So the first one, RL 21-122, that is using CDBG COVID funds to provide $30,000 for HVAC improvements at the YMCA. The reason for that is to reduce the amount of air that is recirculating. They have indicated that that was an engineering problem before, which increased the humidity as there was no sufficient exhausting vent from the showers. So this will kill two birds with one stone and will allow them to decrease the humidity in their facilities, as well as to vent the inside air out, and therefore decrease the ability for airborne pathogens to spread. That's how it's qualifying under COVID. Any questions about that one specifically? Okay, RL 123, this is sort of an amalgamation of ESG COVID funds. And honestly, to summarize it, this is really, think of it as a second year of COVID ESG funds. We're providing additional funds like we did before for the VOA, for hazard pay. For the Y, it will be a bed expansion and some support services as well for their street outreach and their own emergency shelter. It's providing some additional year worth of community of coordinated entry, which we've been using very successfully for the past year. It will provide additional assistance to Catholic Charities TTLP program to allow them to expand their program, provide additional protections against COVID, and it will provide yet more funding for family enrichment networks for rapid rehousing. We've had this discussion before of what's happening. The moratorium is still in place, so homelessness prevention funds cannot be used. We do not know when the moratorium is ending. Once it does, homelessness prevention funds can be used. But in the meantime, and especially when the moratorium hits, more than likely we will be dealing with a very severe homelessness situation. At that point, the best bet is to use rapid rehousing funds. So more than likely, although they could use those funds now for people who are currently homeless, we anticipate there to be a sudden rush when the moratorium ends at some point. That will allow these funds to be quickly used, along with money that was allocated already for this specific program, with a cutoff point of, I believe, will be next September. Does anyone have any questions about the ESG funds? Okay. The next one, RL 21-124. This is to allow us to continue using marketing services from the United Way for the 211 program. We identified this as a need late in the last year's programs. People were not aware of the various rental assistance programs that were available, rental and mortgage assistance. In the meantime, we'll work with the United Way and provided them funding for marketing. This has included commercial ads in the newspaper. I believe they've been doing radio ads. I believe they've been doing direct mailings. We're also looking to expand and complement with some other programs. For example, our CARES backpack program will be including some numbers to include that. So that'll be sort of tied in with this marketing as well. So we can directly connect with people who are receiving those. So that's it's a variety of marketing procedures that the United Way will be using. Are there any questions about that? That will be CDBG COVID.
All right.
Thank you, Council President. So we talked about how are you, Mr. So we talked about the marketing. Please clarify, did we this initiative for the marketing, or our first time?
This will be the second time. It's like I said, a lot of these are sort of continuations for a second year of COVID. So we've already provided funding to the United Way for marketing. This will be sort of an extension of that marketing program.
Okay.
I do not have specifics of exactly what they're going to be doing. I do apologize for that. That's not been identified to me. If you're wanting more details before approval, I can certainly reach out to the United Way and the mayor's office to see what they're wanting to do with that.
You know, that's where I was going in terms of
all right.
outcomes data associated with what is the return on our investment? Are we seeing increased applications, increased inquiry? How are we proving that this donation has improved our visibility with those that are in need?
Okay, so I'll reach out to them and see if they have any numbers on that and provide them to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that particular item? Oh.
Oh, sorry, I just thought about it. I looked at my notes. Sorry about that. So now you did mention the CARES backpack. How does that tie into this?
That's being paid through. It's being paid
Yeah.
through the last round
Right.
of CARES CDBG money. We had additional money under nonprofit assistance, so we said if we're tying the CARES program into COVID by providing this sort of United Way marketing structure, as well as things such as sanitizing solution, gloves, paper masks still. I even reached out to CARES to see if they could find booklets that teach kids how to sort of handle, when you're exposed to someone who's got a disease, or how to recognize if someone's sick or something and what to do, make sure you wash your hands, that kind of thing. I don't know if they're doing that yet, but we basically said these are a lot of good things we could put in there, and they identified a few of them. I believe they were still looking into the booklets, but that will be on top of the school supplies, just regular school supplies, as well as the backpacks and stuff. So it's like notebooks, pencils, papers, those kinds of things, in addition to COVID supplies.
Separate. We already voted on that one
Well, that
separately.
was, you didn't approve, well, I don't believe it was approved because the number was low enough. Pretty sure that or maybe we did approve it. I don't know specifically, but it's the CARES backpack program, and that's being funded through round
We
one
did that
COVID
last
CDBG.
time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else on that item?
Okay, thank you. On to RL 125.
125. So this is for First Ward Action Council to use COVID funds to purchase some lots for affordable housing. One issue known with COVID is that there's a lack of housing, and people that are not housed are more susceptible to catching diseases. With the next round of COVID, what are the new variants coming along? It's even more important for us to try to do what we can. And this is just an item we identified in a project that we get moving pretty quickly on. This may be included with home funds in the future. I do not know yet. That is up to the mayor's office to make a final determination of that. But we can use CDBG COVID at the initial phase for purchasing lots for them to rehab and turn into a low-cost rental unit.
And Council President. So this application was not part of the first round in the hearing process. This was something that came to the office that the office felt was fundable criterion, correct?
It was done. Okay, so the way COVID round 2 worked was we had a public hearing and people gave us insight. The CDAC,
Right.
CDAC at I believe in February came to you and indicated there were various projects and ideas they had for funding. Some of these were not strictly identified. They were things more like rental assistance in
Correct.
general, nonprofit assistance in general. This, I believe, is going to fall under the sort of general nonprofit assistance. But it was identified through the public hearing we kept hearing, and it wasn't, understand, since we've been dealing with regular CDBG and COVID at the same time, we hear a lot of similar things. One thing we kept hearing was housing. So that was one we identified. First Ward was looking to do a development project, and I believe they're aiming for the north of Maine area. And so I believe they identified a couple of locations in there where they could purchase a couple of units and rehab them. Now, this is separate from the other home money we're providing them from 33 Linden. That's a separate project.
Absolutely. So my question then, since we left things very general, if there was an organization or an entity that has a viable project, they should contact you because they may fit under that category, even if they've missed the first round of hearings.
Well, the way the round 2 works, like I said, we had the public hearing. CSC did make recommendations for all the ESG funds. So an agency wanted to access ESG COVID funds. They needed to go through the COC. COC made recommendations to CDAC. CDAC had the public hearing. CDAC made recommendations to you. As for nonprofit assistance, that's not been detailed yet on exactly what. The mayor has identified a few key projects he wanted to. Some were the ones that went through we didn't do an application process. It's more like what do people identify as needed to be done in the area. The mayor may choose to do an open application process in the future. That's up to him, and I can't speak for him, unfortunately. We did that for the last round of COVID funding, so it's entirely plausible we'll do that for the next round of COVID funding, but I cannot promise that. We may also open up the agencies that were assisted with 3 months worth of operational funding for 6 months worth of operational. That may be a potential way they go as well, but that's not been determined finally yet. All we know for certain is we've identified money to go to nonprofit assistance. That's the
Perfect.
stuff that's sort of been sealed into the resolutions that have been approved.
But then, based upon what we're hearing, entities that may felt they missed the boat can still reach out to you because the door is not closed.
Correct.
Okay, so I want that to be clarified. So as we continue to allocate resources towards COVID fundable procedures, ideas, what have you, that fit in those general categories, people know how to not only reach out for information, but who to reach out to the information, who to reach out to for the information.
Well, ultimately, I am not the determiner of that.
No, but you're the conduit through which the information flows, correct?
Correct. But I
Okay.
would instantly pass them on to the mayor's office. Determination if they want to award a specific agency sort of application.
Perfect. But we know the door is not closed. So
Correct. Any
Thank you.
agency can call me at any time, and I've talked to a lot of agencies since COVID has started with what we can and can't do. But yes, currently we have a pool of funds for nonprofit agencies. We do not yet know other than these specific ones, we don't know exactly what else we'll be doing.
thank you.
Yeah, I was trying to hear. Okay, yes. That's the Broome County Council of Churches funding. That's for additional funding for their, I believe it's I hate saying soup kitchens, but it's the double check. Oh, yeah, it's the food pantries. Yes, so that would be Chow's Food Pantries. They have a variety of food pantries in the area, and due to economic downturns due to COVID, these things are in more need than ever. Yep, thank you.
Hello again. It's still Sharon. So I believe Ken spoke with you about this request for legislation a few times, and in fact, I believe Councilman Riley reached out to Ken for additional information with regards to comparable salaries. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And now we are moving on to pending legislation. Okay.
There's the three extra
that's
ones
right.
at the end. Yep.
28. Yep, that's right. Chuck, go ahead. 34, 35, 36. My, it's kind of strange who's at the paper. And isn't it? I do too. I just think that, yeah. Okay, Chuck, so go ahead and do the last three.
21-134 is a resolution asking to move money into the joint sewage sewer project. That's the project that we're doing over at the sewage treatment plant, where we have 2 employees working in City Hall, ensuring that everyone gets paid properly, all the documentation is done. They're both part of the reason that I think you all saw the report from OSC. They played an integral part in it, and we had them budgeted through the end of June. I'm asking to take this out through the end of July.
Any questions?
And half of the money gets reimbursed by all the other municipalities.
Thank you. Next one?
Any questions?
Okay.
21-135. As you may or may not know, the fire chief retired effective July 5th. We're required to have a fire chief there, so I'm asking this to be expedited for next Wednesday and backdated to July 6th payment schedule. And basically what this is doing is covering the payout that we have to make, along with promoting an individual into the acting fire chief for the remainder of the year, and putting in someone into a acting fire marshal position for the end of the year. We may come back here and have to do something else, but since this all came about pretty quickly, I did what I knew we had to do yesterday to get this taken care of for today.
Any questions?
This money is actually 33,000 of it's coming out of the fund balance.
Thank you. On to 136.
Before I get to the next resolution, I sent everybody out an email yesterday explaining RL 21-119, that the original resolution said that we were going to keep the stimulus money into a restricted fund balance account. That's what I was told, the way the state wanted it done. They came out with new guidance last week, and they want none of this money to go through fund balance, period. Okay, they sent us strict guidance on how they want it to be done. So instead of it being in a restricted fund balance, it's going to be sitting in a other liability account. And we'll come down asking to move it out of the other liability account into the expense accounts that we're going to expend it to. We're setting up a project code F0015 so we can track all the spending associated with the stimulus funds. Anybody wants to know how much money we spent, we can go in and put up that project code and see what was spent and where it was spent. So every time we come down here, we're going to ask you to move money to a certain account. It's always going to have F10015. Hopefully we don't have to create a new account for you each time, that you can just accept. That's how this will all be. We'll list it on there, but so we don't, every piece of legislation does not say create a new account, a whole new whereas in the legislation. City Council's done this before for other projects. So I don't know, before we do that, if anybody has any questions on that letter.
Thank you. Yes, my question is, I was just a little bit confused because my interpretation of the letter was that the legislation would be to create the entire budget line, as you're saying, to be able to track the funding. But this just seems to be about the $25,000. Oh, I see. So it's set. I see. Okay. I see. Okay.
So there'll be a motion made on the floor at the next work session to amend, I think it's 119,
I think 119.
resolution that you passed, outlining the changes. Very simple change that you're going to see. And I think we actually have that done, right, Janine? Did I send that back to you today? So we can send it out to you tomorrow so you see what we're asking you to change. It's just removing the restricted fund balance to other liabilities account. That's all it's really doing. Yeah, it's a different account. And none of this is going to go through a fund balance account ever. As we spend it, we're going to bring in the revenue at the same time, so it'll be a zero wash to the city's fund balance. I think it's smart what the state's doing.
Right. Okay. So then this 25,000, the RL 136, that would be to authorize that money to come from this new line that we're creating.
Yes. We're going to take $25,000 out of account A6. I think it's A688. I don't know exactly. It's called other liabilities. It's not a budget account. And we're going to move it into account A1210-525-900 F0015. That's the expense account for $25,000. And we'll record the revenue that we're receiving from the stimulus funds in A44089 F0015.
I see.
So
Okay.
the entry that we're going to be making is increasing a revenue 25, increasing the expense 25. So the net is zero.
Okay. And will we have a chance to ask questions about the amendment? Or should I ask my question now?
Records and the legislation that I'm looking at, and I could be wrong, Chuck, is set for July 14th, 2021 and hasn't been passed yet. Is that correct?
I thought we didn't pass it yet?
It's pending for next week.
Okay.
So we don't have to amend anything. I think it's a change from the work session, and we will amend our internal draft. So I apologize if I misspoke before. I also thought it had passed. So we will amend the current draft and resubmit to you with the proper lines in it.
I'm
Does that
sorry.
make sense?
Yep, it does.
And for new council members who are back, the reason I thought we had to do a motion to essentially a new RL with an amendment is if you have already passed something, unless it's not dispositive, it's some technical, error, you have to go through the new process of RL and then a new resolution amendment. Otherwise, you can do some amendments on the floor, but it has to be at that moment. And then you would say move to accept the RL or the resolution as amended. Does that make sense?
Aviva, you got other questions?
Yes, I have questions about the unrestricted account, or let me make sure
The unrestricted is going out of there. The restricted.
okay.
That
And
part
so
of the
what,
legislation is being crossed out.
right, okay. And so what is the functional difference between those two? Like, for example, what would, in order to earmark or allocate money for certain projects, would that change the way that we would do that? Does that change based on whether it's a restricted or
Nothing's going to
unrestricted?
change. We still have to file. Every time we spend money out of this, we have to come to council, move it out of the A601, move it into these revenue and expense lines, like we're doing on this 25,000. The way I was told before was that we would put the 23,000 into a revenue that would put $23 million into a fund balance, and then you'd have to restrict it. Okay, that would increase the city's fund balance short time until that money was all spent. That's not what they want to do, and it makes 100% sense why this guidance came out. None of it's going to go through fund balance going
Okay.
forward.
And so when you say you restrict it, that means like it's earmarked or designated to
Right, but
do
the
a certain
restricted
thing.
part is gone.
Right,
Okay, we're
okay.
not doing that anymore. We're going to put it into what we call an other liability. What that's saying is that 23 million, we owe that to somebody right now. If we don't spend it, we have to give it back to the federal government. But as we spend it, we spend, say, $1 million. 22 million will stay in the other liabilities. If we don't spend that 22 million, it's got to go back to the federal government. Okay,
Right.
that's how it's being set up.
Okay. And so my last question, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but I have seen, like, I guess maybe a press release or other announcements that some of this money has already been allocated to certain projects, but it wouldn't be, we would have to approve
I don't think
that,
there's
right?
been any money allocated to any project, to my knowledge, except for this 25,000, plus the lost revenue that I talked to you about the last
Right.
time, which was like $6 million and change, I think.
Yeah.
I know the mayor's talked about doing roughly $5 million worth of work at the water filtration plant. Okay, I'm not aware of anything else that he's talked about. I know there's been a lot of dialogue and discussion, but those are the only things that I'm aware of.
Right. But that $5 million at the sewage treatment plant, for example, would have to come through
Yes,
us
it's at the
for
water filtration plant. Yes,
water filtration. Okay.
we went out to bid to find out what it's going to cost. So hopefully we'll get those answers in next week and come back with the next work session asking you to move it and what we're going to do with it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Councilman Riley.
Thank you. So, again, thank you for asking those questions. I had the same questions because there is definitely a difference in how a restricted account versus a general fund account is managed. There's differences in terms of management. So that clarification helped a lot. Now, I know we're creating new lines to have the F0015 added, but the mayor coronavirus expense line, is there a reason why it's specified as such? And we had several different tiers for different uses, different purposes. So why this one? Why are we? Okay. Okay. And so, and we had another line for that though, and it was not, okay. So this fund is not considered a grant, so we can't roll it. Okay. So because we're making this line, we're specifying, oh, well, it was already created, you're saying, in 2020. Okay. But we could have added F0015 to the COVID building fund. I can't remember the exact name of it, but there was another line specifically for cleaning the elevators. And we had, do you recall? Correct. But since we're editing a line, right. Okay. Well, I will email you because we have several lines that we can amend to add the F0015. I'm wondering why this one specifically was chosen to. Okay. Okay. Now, my other question, there are a lot of press releases, and perhaps you're not the person to answer this, but is there a prospectus of projects that are being discussed that we may hear more about through a press release for the ARP funds? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay. No, we're good? All right. Sharon?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Still Sharon. Before we move on, I just want to be clear because the one that we were considering with regards to the restricted fund issue that was pending coming up in July, there was a resolution from well over 30 days ago, on June 23rd, 2021, where we accepted the giant tranche of money. And it does have some language and we're looking at that should be amended based off of what Chuck was saying with regards to the guidance that he's received. So what I would ask for your permission, because these are things we want to move on, they're infrastructure, they're relief to our citizens. If you do is be able to prepare an RL and draft res that has the corrected language that you guys can hear it next Wednesday. Straw poll, is that okay? I know that is way more expedited than we would usually do, but I think due to the fact that it has a companion piece of relevant legislation that is set with the right language, we might as well adjust the language from the June 23rd, 2021 resolution at the same time.
Thank you, Sharon.
Any thoughts?
Yeah. Yep.
I just don't want to have something correct and then incorrect on our books at the same time.
Right.
Thank
you.
you so much. I really appreciate that.
Okay. So I think now we're moving on to pending legislation.
All right, it looks like there's 7 on the pending legislation. Is there any questions on those?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you everyone for just setting this up in the way that, it worked out okay today. It's a little different, but it's really nice to have everybody back. And I was wondering, Denise, can we get Ron on the agenda for maybe next week so we can have an update, all of us to hear what's going on in the chamber. So we really appreciate that. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Oh, sorry.
Turn my mic on. Thank you again, Council President. I brought this up before, but I think it's time, since we're transitioning, we have to transition our public as well on how to now participate in the meetings because we've gotten quite a response with the online presence. So as we move to now being live, would we consider also having another mechanism for the viewers at home to participate in public comment via telephone, perhaps, as we did during the early phases of COVID when we were here and they were there? So I want us to just talk about that and consider, because right now, again, everything is new. We're new to this process. We're new to this format. How do we want to transition our public so that they are able to access us and participate as much as possible?
So what do we have in place? Oh,
Is it possible the public can still do Zoom meetings? Is it possible?
So open meetings law requires us to have in-person public meetings. On, I think it was June 23rd, I could be somewhat wrong on the date. On June 23rd, the governor removed the authority for municipalities to conduct virtual or remote meetings. So with regards to the first kind of aspects of that question, can we continue to do Zoom? The short answer is no. Now, there are web platforms that members of the public can view. We're using one now, right? So then the question becomes, do you guys want to invest in some kind of hybrid for public comments? And I was speaking with Councilman Riley about this earlier. Public hearings are governed by required to be in person, and there's obviously some accommodation necessary under the ADA, right? Public comment is something that is governed by city council, this particular body. It is not required of all municipalities in our code, but the manner and method is entirely up to you, which is why prior to COVID, we accepted things in the forms of written statements or email. So what the city's perspective is, if you guys come up with a method and manner that you want to enable it, we will do our best to get it done and or price it out if that's an issue, and we will come back to you. There are certain things that are easier to do not in this space. Remember, this space is open to the public all day long. So that may be something you want to consider. Maybe you want to do an interim until we get to council chambers. But we are really here to serve you when it comes to the method by which you want to continue to do public comment, in addition, obviously, to in-person. Does that help, Tom?
It does. So, Councilman Riley, you mentioned telephone. That's a possibility, right? Is that a viable possibility?
Yeah.
Is that easy to implement?
Yeah, we could. Phone is probably easier at this time to enable public comment than trying to see people's faces. But if that's the method that council would like us to explore in the first instance, because in many ways that was what was working for us in the space, we're happy to go. If you guys want to take a straw poll, let us know. Percolate, let us know. That's up to you. So just to confirm, kind of straw poll of city council, you want to make sure that the public is able to comment from a remote setting of some kind. Do you care what method?
the phones before, that was, when you've done that and it worked out pretty well. And, so maybe we should look at that because it seems like that might be the easiest way outside of folks actually coming in person, right? And I'm also wondering what is in place for folks that do want to come in person? As far as, COVID related stuff, precautions and
We're giving a lot to the public. Second question first. City Hall, outside the hours of 8 to 4:30, is governed by the rules of New York and the CDC, which require masks only for unvaccinated individuals who cannot be socially distanced, or really even if they can be socially distanced. It recommends masks for people who are vaccinated only if they're indoors in very obvious cases. During the day, however, we are home and host the New York State Courts, you're still under the rules governing the Office of Governmental Administration, or I should say OCA, Office of Court Administration, and they require masks in courtrooms and in any place that hosts courts. So they still require masks downstairs. So the short answer is for you guys always meet in the evening. So members of the public are governed by the rules, just as you are, that New York State and the CDC have with regards to distinguish between vaccinated and non-vaccinated. The first part of your question is yes, phone was easier before. We had a phone line set up. I'm not sure we're still equipped for that, but I think it is something that I would like to it's easy to reset up in the space. If we wanted to loop it in through a Zoom or other type of program, I think that might take more time. I should say, what I can do is I can get back to you by the end of the week or Monday.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Councilman Spruill.
maybe the professional provide response to the potential viable option strategy that we could have a conversation about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Because I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact that short-term and long-term impact of this.
Yep.
Because we're going to be here for a while,
Yeah.
and then we're going to be back in chambers for a while, and to string resources for two very divergent plans will go make sense. So that would be
Thank you. Councilman.
Thinking out loud. So if we move to, President Wesley mentioned allowing the public to come in to Uptown State. My only concern with that is it's a small space. If we had a hot topic, I think it would, I would be concerned about it. Or, there's 50 or 60 people. That would concern me greatly. Not that I would want to avoid people. I mean, that's thing. But I think we're in a environment here where I would want 50 or 60 people there. That would make me nervous.
So also, what's the capacity, right? How many folks can you have in a
But I don't know how
space.
you can't say 30, come to 30, can't take another people.
I think we also need to find out what the buyers will.
It was capacity restriction, but I absolutely understand what you're talking about, because even when we try, you can see the chairs aren't back to back next to each other. This is the largest space, accessible space that we have in City Hall at the present. If we had something like 30 to 50 people, I would be able to do it safely. Okay, if we have to do that, we're not going to turn people away at the door. So for example, you can see up top here on the second floor, count. Okay, if we had to have overflow, we have auxiliary here, officers, to make sure like that. So it does add a fair amount of space. See how much space there is. So we have like that, but I think what I'm hearing from Councilman Scanlon and Councilman Sorrenti are a little bit divergent in the sense that Councilman Scanlon is saying, what do we want to do for Wednesday? I need a plan for Wednesday.
Stand with Councilman Scanlon.
So I think the way to kind of converge these is for the city to try and get you the options kind of as soon as possible. And then for council to straw vote on it in advance, like via email or however you want to do it through the clerk's office to advise them. And then we will accommodate whatever is the easiest thing to do for next week. If we can, hopefully we can. And then we can also think about kind of some longer term solutions. Does that sound like a decent plan?
Yes, it does. And I just want to also just shout out the IT team because you guys were very resourceful. You jumped when we had to make plans pretty quickly. I mean, we've seen this room in various formations so that we could be accessible for our neighbors and friends. So thank you.
Any other comments on that discussion?
Thank you. I just wanted to add, I know we're waiting on that list of of possibilities for configurations of the technology. I would add it. My opinion is that both being able to call in by phone and being able to call in over Zoom or some other like video um, webinar platform, they both have different benefits. I don't know if it would be overly complicated to potentially have the option of both of those, but I've been obviously a web, some kind of video chat platform is better because then constituents can watch the meeting and know when to call in, and they can see us. However, I have been contacted by constituents who do not have Zoom capabilities, and they were frustrated and confused by having to call in via the Zoom meeting, like when we transitioned to Zoom and not phone. So I don't know if it would be overly complicated to have both of those, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that if we're thinking about long-term accessibility, are we taking into account the technology that's available to our constituents? Okay. So thanks, IT. You're amazing. All right. Anything else? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.